Hi guys, welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things wedding planning. I'm Megan with Events by Eva here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Today we're going to talk about creating your wedding timeline and setting your ceremony start time. And so we're not going to talk about creating your wedding timeline in terms of the flow of your event for this one. We're more so going to talk about how to set the bigger chunks of your wedding. Our wedding timelines have a ton of detail, a lot of little nitty-gritty detail. We're not going to get into that on this video, but something that we've been running into in preparation for the fall this year is vendor contracts not lining up with the larger chunks that the couple has set for their times. Meaning their ceremony time or their reception time, cocktail hour time. We're finding that a lot of the contracts that have been booked with the various vendors just are not lining up with the ceremony time or cocktail hour time that the couple has set, put on their wedding invitations. And once those go out, there's not really a whole lot we can do except for change things on the vendor end, which could end up costing you more than you anticipated in the beginning of your wedding planning process. So I thought it might be helpful to chat about how to go about setting your wedding ceremony time, your cocktail hour time, and your reception time in the best way you possibly can before you get into all the coordination process, in hopes that you don't have to make as many changes. If you have a full planner and your planner doesn't, handle all of your invitations for you, I do recommend reaching out to them about setting your RSVP date, setting your ceremony time. If you do have a day of coordinator and they are willing to help you set that time so that you can avoid some of the issues that we're about to talk about, I do highly recommend doing that. So the first thing you'll want to do when you are in the process of figuring out what time you're going to start your ceremony is figure out what your venue rental hours are. Let's say that venue rental starts at 7 a.m. and it ends at 11, starts at 8, ends at 12. Those are all things that we need to consider in terms of setting your ceremony time. We need to know, how long is it going to be from ceremony start to reception end, and how much time do you need for cleanup? When does everything have to be loaded out? So let's say that your venue rental ends at 12 a.m. Then you're probably going to want to, at least, depending on how large your setup is, this would be a good, question for your planner as well. If you have a full production, you might have a whole other day of loadout. But I want to say on average, most loadouts take between an hour and a half to an hour, 2 hours sometimes. I think the last wedding we had, that loadout was almost 4 hours. And that wasn't even everything, but it was almost 4 hours. But as I said, on average, about an hour and a half, 2 hours. Yeah. So definitely consider that to start with your end time that you need to have. Then the second step that you need to think about is if you're doing a first look or not. Whether or not you're doing a first look can greatly change if you have your ceremony a little bit earlier or a little bit later. If you need more of those photography hours on the front end or on the back end. The third thing that you will want to consider when figuring out your wedding ceremony time is how long do you have your DJ? How long do you have your band? What are their contracted hours? Can I have a 5-hour dance party, or can I only have 4? I've had weddings where they've contracted the DJ to a certain rate, and that meant that they had to have their ceremony start to reception end time within 3 hours. So that's a pretty go time. I think in Tennessee, on average, most weddings are about 4 to 5 hours on the higher end. 5, 6, we're really getting on the higher end, and then we're starting to have to add on more hours for vendors, etc. And so the fourth vendor that really is important to be considering your ceremony time, your cocktail time, your reception time is your bartenders. Some states have a legal limit on how long you can serve alcohol in that state for an event bar, or how long that event bar can be open. So you definitely want to see, what are you contracted to for your bartenders? Does it require adding on an hour? Will they allow me to add on an hour? And if they do, great. If they don't, there might be very specific reasons for why they don't, whether that is, that they're legally not allowed to and they could get their license taken away from the state, all those sorts of things. So Yeah, that is really kind of the fourth large item to be thinking about. A few other things that you'll want to think about when considering what your ceremony start time will be and when your dinner will be and what the flow of that part of the event will look like is if you want to do a golden hour or not. So I would say almost everybody wants to do a golden hour and take advantage of that great lighting and have kind of a few different looks of portraits of the two of you in there. The easiest way to figure out what your golden hour time is to literally Google in the area where you're getting married, sunset time. Let's say we're in Chattanooga, so we'll say sunset time, Chattanooga. Down to the neighborhood if you can, if it pulls it up that way, that's what I would recommend searching it as. So let's say your sunset time is 7:30, then we're gonna wanna set your golden hour time for 7 p.m. A lot of the time we also do rely on the photographer to help communicate when is best lighting for them. So, you know, we might say that that sunset time is 30 minutes before, but sometimes we're pushing it up a little bit. Sometimes it's a little bit later, just because of how the lighting is looking that day, or just how the flow of things are moving and if it makes sense to move on to the next thing or not. So those are all things to kind of consider, but that might kind of change the flow of, like, you know, when your cocktail hour is ending, how quick we're moving through certain things in dinner and certain activities, when we're opening the dance floor, all those kinds of things to think about, which hopefully, you know, your coordinator is able to help you in terms of advising on all of that. So I hope that you found this helpful in terms of how to set your wedding ceremony time, so that you don't have to have as many surprises as you get into the coordination process for planning how your day of is truly going to go. And I always really say that the timeline is a guideline. We change a lot on the spot depending on what just really makes sense on that day. Weather can influence that a ton. You know, but it is good to have as much of a plan as you possibly can. And I think that your ceremony start time and your reception end time are not really things that you have as much wiggle room on, you know, depending on your venue contract and how all that plays out. But yeah, I hope that you found this helpful, and feel free to comment below if you have any questions on how to set your ceremony time and your larger chunks of time throughout your wedding. And feel free to click that subscribe button, and yeah, we will see you in a video soon.